Shock rocks the royal family as Queen Camilla's title is suddenly stripped, and King Charles is left facing a storm no one saw coming. Whispers of betrayal, rising public anger, and a palace reckoning explode into the open. What went wrong? And why now? The crown is trembling. The private estate that sparked a storm. Raymill House was always meant to be Camilla's sanctuary, her quiet place far from the cold corridors of Buckingham Palace. Nestled in the countryside, the estate had long been kept separate from royal affairs. But in 2025, it became something far more dangerous than a peaceful escape. It became a symbol of division. What started as harmless weekends alone turned into whispers the palace could no longer ignore. Paparazzi snapped Camilla walking the grounds, not with Charles, but with unnamed guests. Discreet cars arrived late at night. Curtains drawn. No official schedules. No security from the royal rota. Just questions, unanswered and growing. Why did the queen consort still live separately from the king? And more importantly, who was she seeing when no one was watching? Within palace walls, murmurs turned into suspicion. Some staffers began noticing subtle shifts. Meeting notes passed through unofficial channels. Calls placed not through the royal switchboard, but directly from Raymill. The estate began to feel less like a home, and more like a headquarters. By late August, insiders confirmed Camilla had met privately with several members of Parliament, senior donors, and figures from the arts and media world. All of it off the official record. None of it cleared with Charles's team. For a woman once painted as a reluctant consort, Camilla was suddenly moving with intention and autonomy. "There are two monarchies now," one aide whispered. "The official one, and the one Camilla thinks she's building." But the public saw a different kind of story. Weekend after weekend, as Camilla vanished to Raymill, newspapers began asking why. Photos showed her alone, unsmiling, her expressions stiff, her clothes more subdued. And while Catherine was capturing hearts across Australia, Camilla's absence was becoming its own scandal. What was once viewed as personal independence was now being seen as royal resistance. Even long-time supporters began to grow uneasy. The queen consort still living apart, still separate, still operating on the edges. And in a monarchy that thrives on unity, the optics were devastating. But the turning point wasn't the photographs. It was the pattern. Camilla had created a rhythm of withdrawal, secrecy, and silence. She was no longer the wife supporting the king. She had become a wild card, unpredictable, untethered, and quietly powerful. And that was when the palace began to panic. Raymill House, once her escape, had now sparked a full-blown internal investigation. Who she met, what was said, what influence was being exerted from behind that quiet countryside gate. As one royal advisor put it, she's playing by her own rules, and we're all catching up too late. The estate was no longer a retreat. It was a question mark hanging over the entire monarchy. And behind that question was the name Diana, waiting, as always, to return. Haunted by the past, Diana's shadow returns. No matter how many years passed, no matter how many titles changed hands, there was one truth the royal family could never outrun. Princess Diana never really left. And for Camilla, that ghost had never loomed larger. As queen consort, Camilla had spent years carefully building an image of quiet strength and unwavering support. But the public never forgot. And the comparison to Diana was never far behind. In 2025, it exploded back into the spotlight. Catherine, having returned from illness with unmatched grace and purpose, was now not only dominating headlines, she was defining them. Her every appearance, gesture, and speech became an event. Children waved at her in the streets. Women called her an inspiration. Men admired her poise. The press dubbed her the modern Queen of Hearts. And just like that, Diana's memory was no longer memory. It was alive again, through Catherine. Camilla, by contrast, faded into the background, but not gently. Her presence at public events felt colder, her smiles forced, her body language disengaged. Headlines shifted. Side-by-side images of Catherine and Camilla began to circulate again, just like in the old tabloids. The difference now? Social media amplified them to millions within seconds. And the verdict was cruel. One walks with grace, the other walks with guilt, read one viral comment beneath a royal Instagram post. Suddenly, Camilla was being scrutinized in ways she hadn't faced since the 1990s. And this time, there was no Diana to defend herself. Only her legacy, shining brighter than ever through Catherine. To many, it felt like poetic justice. The woman who once stood in the shadow of an affair was now standing in the shadow of a new generation of admiration. But inside the palace, the mood was not poetic. It was tense. Camilla reportedly grew withdrawn, frustrated by headlines she could not control and a narrative she couldn't rewrite. She had spent decades earning the crown, and yet it seemed that the public still viewed her as the other woman, no matter how many ceremonies had passed. Catherine's soaring popularity wasn't just a matter of public relations, it was a direct threat to Camilla's legitimacy. The Queen Consort is supposed to support the crown, but what happens when the public would rather be led by someone else? Asked one senior palace official. By mid-September, an internal report showed a stark divide in public perception. Camilla's approval rating had flatlined. Catherine's had spiked. And the press was beginning to ask the question aloud. Had the crown backed the wrong queen? The monarchy thrives on public faith. And now, that faith was flowing, not toward Camilla, but toward Catherine. In private, Camilla was said to be livid. In public, she stayed silent. But that silence only fed the narrative. The Queen Consort had spent years escaping Diana's ghost. But in the end, it wasn't Diana who returned to haunt her. It was Catherine, living proof that the public had never wanted Camilla to wear that crown in the first place. The approval ratings that rocked the crown. Numbers don't lie, and for Queen Camilla, the numbers are brutal. By mid-2025, multiple polls revealed a reality the palace could no longer downplay. Camilla's public approval was in collapse. Not just declining, collapsing. Her rating barely crossed 30%, and in some polls, it dropped as low as 12% when people were asked if she represented the future of the monarchy. It wasn't a media smear campaign. It wasn't a partisan attack. It was public sentiment, loud, measured, and undeniable. The people had spoken, and they didn't want her. By contrast, Catherine's numbers surged like never before. Across age groups, countries, and even among Republicans, she was topping every chart. Trusted, admired, viewed not just as a princess, but as a leader. Her speeches were quoted in Parliament. Her pictures went viral. And in the public's mind, she already was their queen, whether or not she wore the title. One veteran pollster said bluntly, "We've never seen a royal divide this sharp. Catherine is soaring. Camilla is drowning." Inside the palace, it caused panic. The monarchy depends on perception. It doesn't function on policy or elections. It survives through public trust. And for Camilla, trust was vanishing by the day. The comparisons made it worse. Side-by-side approval charts were published in nearly every major outlet. Camilla's dip was always next to Catherine's rise. Every speech Camilla gave felt flat, while Catherine's quiet presence in classrooms and health summits created waves. The crown was slipping, not literally, but symbolically. Camilla may have been queen consort on paper, but in the hearts of the people, she never truly arrived. And now, the consequences of that disconnect were coming fast. Within the royal household, senior aides began voicing concerns that had once been whispered in private. One courtier reportedly said, "She's not connecting," and worse, she doesn't seem to care that she's not. There were internal efforts to revive Camilla's image, exclusive interviews, increased appearances, PR cleanups, but none of it worked. The public had made up their minds. Every time Camilla appeared, social media drowned her in comparisons to Diana, or worse, silence. And that silence said it all. She was irrelevant. For King Charles, the numbers were heartbreaking. He had spent decades trying to rehabilitate Camilla's image, crafting a slow, careful reintroduction of the woman once branded the villain in Diana's story. He had fought for her. He had changed rules for her. And yet, when it came time for the people to decide if she belonged, they said no. The crown he wanted her to wear had become a burden, and everyone could see it, especially those waiting in the wings. Because as Camilla's reign faltered, another queen was already rising. The whispers inside palace walls. As the headlines intensified and the public backlash grew louder, a different kind of storm was brewing behind closed doors, one far more dangerous than any media narrative. Inside Buckingham Palace, whispers turned into full-blown alarm. Staffers began noticing strange patterns, briefings that didn't come from the king's office, notes left unsigned, but clearly pushing agendas, meetings being booked with influential figures, without going through the proper royal channels, and all of it, reportedly, originating from Camilla's private circle. It was subtle at first, just unusual scheduling, a few extra names on guest lists, but by the summer of 2025, there was no denying it. Camilla was building her own operation. And it wasn't just social. Insiders confirmed that she'd hosted private meetings with members of parliament, donors, media executives, and even cultural leaders, all at unofficial venues, some even at Raymill House. She wasn't just holding court, she was holding influence. One senior aide finally voiced what many had feared. She's creating a power base. Separate from the king, independent, and unchecked. That revelation triggered a silent but immediate internal review. Security logs were pulled, guest lists were re-examined, and the truth was worse than expected. Camilla's influence had gone far beyond her constitutional role, and the royals were watching. Princess Anne was the first to take notice. Her military precision and dedication to duty left little room for deviation, and she reportedly confronted Charles directly, asking why Camilla was being allowed to bypass palace protocol. William followed soon after, quiet, but furious. Sources said he had long tolerated Camilla out of duty to his father, but recent developments crossed a line, especially when whispers emerged that Camilla was advocating for her own children to receive formal roles within the monarchy. That, for William, was the final straw. Meetings were called, and within those walls, the gloves came off. Anne, firm and restrained, made her case. "The crown is not your possession," she told Camilla. "It is a responsibility, and you are overstepping." William, sharper, colder, added, You're building something outside of us. That's not loyalty, that's a threat." Camilla, caught off guard, defended her actions as modernizing the monarchy. But no one was convinced. The room went silent, not out of respect, but out of consequence. She wasn't just out of favor with the public. She was losing the trust of the family itself. The monarchy was being pulled into two directions, and Camilla had unknowingly positioned herself as the fracture point. And that fracture was about to break wide open. The royal family confronts the unthinkable. It was never meant to come to this, not behind palace walls, not between family. But by late September 2025, the pressure had become unbearable. The scandals, the polls, the whispers, they had all led to one unavoidable moment, a confrontation that would forever reshape the monarchy. The meeting was arranged without fanfare. No royal court, no press, no courtiers, just 4 people in a soundproof room inside Windsor Castle. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, Prince William. The atmosphere was ice-cold from the start. No greetings, no smiles, just the suffocating weight of what needed to be said. Camilla sat rigid, composed, but visibly cornered. William avoided her eyes entirely. Anne, ever the soldier, stared ahead with unshakable resolve. And Charles, the man who had once defied a nation for the woman he loved, now looked tired, conflicted, and quietly broken. "This isn't about politics anymore," Anne began, her voice sharp. "This is about the crown." Then came the accusations, calmly delivered, but devastating in content. Private influence, unauthorized meetings, attempts to secure future royal roles for her children, and above all, a complete collapse in public trust. Camilla fired back, of course, denying some, justifying others, claiming her actions were meant to support Charles and modernize the monarchy. But no one in the room believed her. William finally spoke, cold, controlled, final. "You've made this about yourself. You've lost the people, and you've lost us." Camilla's composure began to crack. Her mouth tightened. Her voice, usually so measured, wavered. But the most crushing moment came from Charles. After minutes of silence, he looked directly at her and said the words no one thought he ever could. "The crown is not mine to give, and the trust has been broken." It wasn't just a statement. It was a sentence for both their marriage and her reign. There were no screams, no dramatic exits, just silence, the kind that echoes louder than any sound. Then Anne delivered the final words of the meeting. "It's time." And with that, the message was clear. Camilla's reign as queen consort was over. No ceremony, no announcement. Just a decision made behind sealed doors, one that would send shockwaves through every corner of the kingdom. For Charles, it was the most heartbreaking choice of his life. For Camilla, it was the end of the role she had fought decades to secure. And for the monarchy, it was the beginning of something entirely new and deeply uncertain. Because once a queen is stripped of her crown, there's no going back. Charles's heartbreaking decision. It was the kind of moment no king ever prepares for. The cameras were off. The courtiers were gone. And King Charles sat alone in the royal study, clutching a document that would change everything. The official revocation of Camilla's title as queen consort. For hours, he didn't move, just stared at the paper, the ink, the finality. This was the woman he had waited for, fought for, suffered public humiliation for. Camilla wasn't just a partner. She was the love story that had survived everything. Until now. Because love had collided with duty, and the monarchy could no longer afford her. He thought back to the early days, secret phone calls, whispered declarations, two hearts trapped in a gilded system that kept them apart. Back then, it felt like destiny. But now, decades later, that same story had turned into a crisis that threatened to bring down the very crown he had waited a lifetime to wear. He had tried to protect her, shield her from Diana's ghost, help the public see what he saw: loyalty, humor, resilience. But the public never accepted it. And worse, his own family no longer did either. You cannot be king and husband before your father and sovereign, Anne had said quietly the day before. This is not just your legacy. It's the country's. And that truth cut deeper than anything else. The monarchy wasn't a marriage. It was an institution. And that institution was bleeding from the inside. Because of her. So Charles signed the document. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with hands that trembled under the weight of a decision he never thought he'd make. Effective immediately, Camilla would no longer be known as Queen Consort. She would retain the title of Duchess of Cornwall privately, but all royal duties, privileges, and ceremonial status were to be withdrawn. It was the most personal abdication of his reign. As the ink dried, a royal aide entered quietly and took the letter. No words were exchanged, and Charles remained sitting there, alone. He hadn't lost a queen. He had lost the last person who knew him before the crown. Outside, the world continued. Crowds forming, headlines flashing, cameras waiting. Inside, a king sat in silence. The monarchy would move forward. But the man behind it? He had just given up the one person he thought would be beside him until the end. And the echo of that sacrifice would haunt the halls of the palace for years to come. The nation reacts. Shock, division, and protest. The news broke just after dawn. Queen Consort no more. One headline, one moment, and the entire United Kingdom froze. The monarchy, an institution built on stability, ritual, and restraint, had just delivered its most shocking twist in modern history. Camilla, once crowned beside King Charles, was no longer queen. No abdication. No scandalous photos. Just one devastating royal decision that hit the country like thunder. Outside Buckingham Palace, the crowds came almost instantly. Some brought flowers. Others brought signs. But no one came without an opinion. For some, it was justice. For others, it was betrayal. Across social media, hashtags erupted within minutes. Hashtag justice for Diana. Hashtag Queen no more. # long live Catherine. Diana's name, long etched into the nation's soul, returned like a tidal wave. Her face was back on front pages, her legacy dragged once again into the present. Only this time, it came with a sense of resolution. Camilla, many felt, had been publicly erased in the same way Diana was once privately dismissed. And while some royalists mourned the loss of continuity, others celebrated what they saw as long overdue accountability. "It's poetic justice," said one royal watcher in Hyde Park. "Diana never got her crown, but she just got her revenge." But not everyone was clapping. Camilla's loyal base, though small, was fiercely vocal. Former staffers, older royalists, and certain members of the press condemned the palace's silence. They demanded answers. Where was the official statement? Where was the defense? Had Charles simply bowed to pressure, or had something darker forced his hand? Inside Parliament, questions were whispered behind closed doors. If the king could so easily strip a queen consort of her title, what did that say about the monarchy's stability? Meanwhile, Republican groups seized the moment. "This is the beginning of the end," declared one spokesperson on live television. "They've shown the crown is vulnerable. If Camilla can fall, the whole system can." The cracks were visible, not just in public confidence, but in the crown itself. And yet, in the middle of the chaos, something else began to emerge. A quiet calm, a silent shift. A figure who didn't say a word, but didn't have to. Because as the queen consort fell, the people had already chosen their new queen. Catherine and William. The unspoken victory. She didn't issue a statement. She didn't need to. The day after Camilla's title was revoked, Catherine quietly stepped out for a scheduled visit to a children's hospital in Bristol. No change in demeanor, just the same calm presence. But everything had shifted. Cameras followed every moment. And when she knelt beside a child's hospital bed and whispered something only they could hear, a photo went viral with one caption: "Queen in everything but name." For years, she was quietly compared to Diana. But now, that legacy felt real, earned, not inherited. "Catherine didn't win," one broadcaster said. "She endured." And now the public sees her as the monarchy's soul. William stood beside her, taller, firmer, no longer just the heir, but the quiet force of correction. By standing against Camilla, he stood for his mother's memory and for the public's trust. They said nothing. No interviews, no leaks. Just compassion, consistency, and composure. Behind the scenes, aides revealed that Catherine's schedule was shifting. Her upcoming events were being elevated, not just royal duties, but state-level diplomacy. She was no longer participating in the monarchy. She was leading it. Polls confirmed the shift. Over 70% of Britons now saw her as the rightful face of the monarchy's future. Even younger generations, once apathetic, were taking notice. An editorial said it best: "In the silence of Camilla's fall, the monarchy found its voice. And that voice is Catherine's." William followed her lead, not from weakness, but in unity. And in that unity, the monarchy found a new heartbeat. Because sometimes, the strongest victories are the ones never spoken out loud. Camilla's final walk. Alone, uncrowned, unanswered. It happened quietly. No press release, no royal statement. But the image said it all. Camilla, stripped of her title, stepped out of Clarence House for the first time since the fall. No escort, no entourage, no smile. She wore a dark coat, oversized sunglasses, and the unmistakable look of someone carrying the weight of a royal collapse. The photo, taken by a lone paparazzo, became instantly iconic. "Alone, uncrowned, unanswered," one headline read. Within hours, her royal cipher was removed from palace gift shops. Her name disappeared from official itineraries. Courtiers, once loyal, refused to comment. And inside the walls of the monarchy, portraits of Camilla were quietly taken down, replaced with new images of Catherine. The silence was deafening. Critics called it justice. Supporters called it betrayal. But Camilla said nothing, and that silence only deepened the mystery. Why hadn't she defended herself? Why no farewell? Why no final word from the woman who once endured decades of scandal to become queen? Some said she was devastated. Others said she was angry. A few believed she was already writing the next chapter, in private, and on her own terms. But one thing was clear. The monarchy had moved on. And Camilla? She had become the one thing no royal can afford to be: invisible. What comes next? Revenge or retreat? Behind the gates of Raymill House, Camilla has vanished from public life. But inside those walls, a question still haunts the palace. Is she done, or is she plotting her return? Insiders whisper that Camilla has kept detailed journals for years, a record of every slight, every conversation, every secret from behind palace doors. Now, with no crown to protect, she has nothing left to lose. Some believe she's preparing a memoir. Not the soft-focus royal reflections expected of former consorts, but a true tell-all. A book that could shake the monarchy again, filled with names, decisions, and royal wounds never made public. If Camilla speaks, she could take down more than reputations. One insider warns, she could rewrite the royal narrative entirely. Others say she won't fight, that she'll retreat quietly, bitter but resigned, surrounded by her dogs and memories of a crown that never truly fit. Meanwhile, the monarchy rushes to fill the void. Catherine's role expands. William's voice grows louder. The focus shifts to healing, stability, and youth. But beneath every polished photo lies the tension no one wants to say aloud. What if Camilla strikes back? Charles is said to be racked with guilt, not just as a husband, but as a man who made an impossible choice: love or legacy. And while the royal family moves forward, they move with caution, because Camilla may be silent today. But in a kingdom built on history, the past never stays buried for long. And if she returns, it won't be as a queen, it will be as a storm. With Camilla cast out and Charles's silence haunting every corridor, the monarchy faces its most fragile moment in decades. But as Catherine and William quietly rise, the question is no longer about what was lost, but what's coming next. Is this the end of Camilla's reign, or just the beginning?